Welcome to the Unearthed Man podcast, the journey of becoming a conscious man, hosted by Milvo. Hey all, Milvo here, and welcome to episode 30 of the Unearthed Man podcast. In line with my new approach, and before we kick off, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we work and gather, and their continuing connection to land and waters. I pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. I pay tribute to the diversity of First Nations peoples of Australia and their ongoing culture. Now, for those who listened in last week's Season 2 launch, I hope you get a feel for what this season will be like and took time to acknowledge NAIDOC Week. For me, watching and listening to the many Indigenous men and women talk into the importance of healing country and the need to show true recognition of the First Nations peoples has been a very humbling experience. As I discussed in the launch episode, this is an area that I'm placing a lot of focus on and emphasis on. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, then welcome aboard. If you're one of my long-time listeners, then welcome back. I really appreciate your ongoing support. If you're looking to know more about the Unearthed Man, then you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Now for today's episode. Now, you may not remember this. However, I first met my guest at a hotel in Brisbane while he was attending the Extreme Leadership course with my wife and now close friend, Erin Murphy. He came back to our room for a break and time to reflect on the journey he had been on so far. It'd be fair to say there was a lot happening in that space at that point in time. Post that meeting, I followed his journey and watched him provide support for many men. This is through his podcast, Open Up, and I think he's got 250 plus episodes, so definitely jump in and have a listen because the episodes are awesome. The men's collective work, which he recently stepped away from to enable him to focus on the health of fly-in, fly-out workers, and his new program, How to Be Authentically You. He was also voted as the national winner of the Australian Men's Health Forum Men's Health Awards for 2021, which was a very deserving award. He described himself as the FIFO mental health guy, and his motto being, I stand for the FIFO workers who are suffering. I use my voice to speak truth into transformation. I'm really super excited to have him as a guest on the Unearthed Man podcast. Welcome, Samuel Lachie. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I've just called you Samuel. Lucky Samuel. I'll even get your name right.
That's all right. You can mix it however you want.
Hey, buddy. I'm doing really well. Look, I'm genuinely excited to have you on because, from early on when I met you, one of the things, and I may have got this wrong, but I believed one of your ambitions through your podcast was to get to the point, I think, was to fill the MCG or a football stadium with men to hold a men's only circle, but that's like 100,000 people in one stadium. Is that true in my understanding?
That was one of the goals. Yeah, it still remains one of the goals, but obviously the climate we're at, that's not going to happen. It was ambitious, man, but I think what I realized through that, and I've had, when putting that out there, I had a lot of people who I've really helped and given my time to come out and shoot that down and disconnect from me because they thought that was overachieving. And, through Bridge and Extreme, we go through that tall poppy mindset. So I've really seen the power of it to disconnect the people who don't allow themselves to receive or dream, but also to build momentum and give something people to believe in, some sort of purpose to get behind. And, within 2 days of announcing that, I was connected to the CEO of the AFL, the CEO of Marvel Stadium, and, had people from mining companies reaching out to back it. So that was snowballing before COVID happened, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that once this all settles down a bit and we get back to whatever the world of normality may look like, that, you can reignite exactly, that passion. I'd be fully supportive of you. I'll do whatever I can to help you out because I think that'd be just a super amazing event and something that's really needed for men across Australia,
bro.
if not globally. So I'm there for you, man.
That's and that come from seeing Robert Whittaker versus Israel Adesanya and being like, wow, this is a Kiwi and an Aussie, just these two guys filling the stadium for a fight. Why couldn't we fill it? Like, I'm a Kiwi, I know plenty of good Aussie men. Why couldn't we fill it for men's mental health? And I feel like it'll happen, but honestly, man, in learning what I have the last couple of years, I realized that when you put an intention out to the world, you get initiated into having the capacity to hold space for that intention. And to hold MCG, I feel like I've had to go through a lot of stuff, and I'll probably still have to go through more to have that capacity and to find people who can help me do that.
And look, you're absolutely spot on. I think, that's a journey that, a number of us men, a number of men have been on the podcast so far have actually been through, is that how do you create the space within yourself to be able to hold the space for other men? Because that's one thing that I've really learned, is that if I'm closed off and there is absolutely no space in me, then one, I can't hold space for someone else, but two, they energetically feel that there is no space for me to hold that for them either. But as soon as I go blow the heart open and blow open this space within me and go, yeah, I can hold this. And if you've got 40, 50 men who know how to hold space, you will hold space for 100,000 men. Because we can all hold each number of those men in our hands and say, we've got you, brothers. This is a safe space and we're all here together. I think just keep going for it, man. Keep putting it out there. Put the abundance put the intention in the universe. It will happen. Make it happen. Absolutely.
I love this. I didn't expect to get a G up, but yes. Good boost for a Saturday morning.
That's right. That's the way it goes. All right. So let's take half a step back. As my listeners know, that this podcast is a bit about, so it's all good that we are where we are now, right? But how did we get here? So do you want to run through a bit of your story? What is the the Lachie Samuel story to get to this point of wanting to be able to support and help other men?
Yeah, man. I guess it starts like being a teenager, being someone who just showed up so poorly. I remember my high school girlfriend breaking up with me and getting with one of my best friends. And up until that point, and she broke up with me because I was this kid who had two parents who were very much in love, who showed their affection, who never strayed, who never disrespected each other by talking about other people like in a sexual way. And so that's just what I thought it was. And so in this relationship, at about 15, I wrote this love letter and I was like, I'm going to marry you. We're going to have kids. And I didn't understand that was too much and that wasn't acceptable. And so when she disregarded that and broke up with me because of that, because I was too much, it was like this shutting down of my heart. Not that I knew it then, but from that moment, I just become this narcissist, man. We ended up getting back together and I just ended up cheating and becoming someone who, got validation from cheating, didn't understand why I needed to. And because I was getting so close to being caught out, the girls that I was cheating with were, falling and then wanting to tell my partner and to split us up. And so I become this person who who chose to destroy the people around the one I was cheating with, around my partner, around myself, around my friend group, to ensure that I still had this good boy mask on, because I was very much perceived as a good boy, as the smiling, outgoing one, as the catch. But behind closed doors, I was that guy who was very ashamed of his behavior, who knew what he was doing was wrong but didn't understand it and just kept doing it. And that stuff led me to addictions. Upstairs, my dad running the homicide squad in Auckland, me downstairs buying and selling ecstasy and eating most of the ecstasy myself.
Right.
Become an addict and become an alcoholic, drinking all the time, and just to escape, man. Just to escape, and still not understanding. And so got to the point where I got caught out cheating on my partner with my best friend's partner at that time. And instead of face up to any of the consequences and take responsibility, I chose to avoid my partner and book a one-way ticket from Auckland to Kalgoorlie, man. And that's where my mining life began, as that addict, as this man-child who was running away from his issues. And
wow,
yeah, as Bunny Ears quotes, escaped it all. And so when I landed in Cal, I just continued that, man. I remember landing and being taken to a pub, I think at like 11 a.m. And my brother had just finished night shift with his crew and they were blasted. They were blasted and they had skimpies at the bar. And I was like, holy crap, what is this place? This red dirt in the middle of nowhere, 6 hours away from a city. Like, what am I doing? But I just bought into that culture, drinking, and got on the steroids real big. Spent about 4 years there, and when I look back, spent about 300K on drugs, alcohol, skimpies, all that sort of stuff, man, just to hide from it. And met someone there. We thought we fell in love, and interestingly enough, she's in my family village in New Zealand, where like our last names come from. Mm-hmm. Our family house is next to the family house where she grew up.
Oh, wow.
But we're not cousins.
That's okay.
but I met her there, man, and, doing FIFO, I was so attached to being this FIFO worker, being someone who made a lot of money. I was really proud of it. I could go to the pub and, not be ashamed of being a plumber's apprentice or a drain laying apprentice, making like $400 a week instead. Now I'm making like $2,000 to $4,000 a week. And I was very proud. It was the first time that I felt worthy working with the boys, free food, free gym. And so when me and my partner then moved to Perth and I'm working away and she has no support network in Perth, neither did I. But when I go back to work, she became depressed and started threatening to take her life unless I stopped. And me being so attached to that and still being that narcissist, still being selfish, there was no compassion, no empathy for her, man. There was nothing but like a fuck you mindset. Why are you trying to take this away from me? You knew what you got yourself into. And so that carried on. And eventually she did attempt, and I still didn't stop working away. Instead, I increased my swing and we split up. And then, from there, man, realizing that one of my identities was a guy in a relationship, even though I was a terrible partner, a pig of a man at that point. I clung to that identity because that identity gave me external validation. Like anytime I thought my dick was too small, I could ask her and she'd be like, no, it's okay. It's average. It's the same as every other guy's. And I'd do like are you sure? Am I handsome? Yeah, you're hot. Oh, yeah, fuck yeah. So when I lost her, man, I lost that validation. I didn't know how to do that for myself. And so I spiraled pretty hard and got forced to resign from my job. And then just went back into all the addictions and wasted all my money. And then, within that, she let me know she was pregnant with our kid. Still no compassion. It was like why are you doing this to keep me? And when you think about the sort of person I was, there's no fucking way a woman would try and keep someone like that. But that's just how self-centered I was, man. That's, I'd been that self-centered my entire life. So I just continued down that path, and for the next 12 or so weeks, I tried to force her into an abortion.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I treated her very, very poorly, man. And luckily enough, she let me come back into their lives when baby was born. And when baby was born, I had no real identity. I wasn't working FIFO anymore because I was too embarrassed to go back, being forced to resign.
Yeah.
I wasn't in shape anymore, wasn't on the juice anymore, didn't have money, couldn't get women. And so I had no real identity. And when baby was born, I clung to being a dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then in about 3 months, they moved over east because Perth was associated with pain and the suffering of, what I'd caused and the way that I'd shown up. And they left. I guess I lost that little bit of identity and eventually attempted to take my life. Felt like such a burden, both emotionally and financially for my family and the people around me, and just so ashamed of myself and the position I got myself into, having to borrow money to pay child support and pay for my food and pay for my rent was pretty humbling. And so in that moment, I'm one of the lucky ones who got to, in the midst of it, step back away from it and pull out, not go all the way through. And I remember crying on the ground, thinking about my daughter and feeling like this sense of heartbreak for her, thinking about me taking my life and how that would impact her growing up, which I'd never really had that consideration before.
Yeah.
And so I guess following that, I made the decision for the first time in my life to live for her instead of living for myself. And I guess a distinction is live for her, not through her. And so I just, while they were on the East Coast, did everything I could to better myself. And over the span of 2 years, I got myself into a really grounded place, found a beautiful partner who was very stable and looked after me through my highs and my lows, through my depression and suicidality throughout that whole period, and even over the last couple of years since then. And then I, because I still had debt, decided to go back to FIFO and was like, yeah, man, $4,000 a week. I'm killing it. I'm going to invest in some cryptocurrency. I'm going to buy Bitcoin, and I sold too early. I'm going to buy Bitcoin. I'm working with the boys, free food, like purpose. Fuck yeah, this is it. I'm so glad to be back here. But within a couple months, one of the boys up there took his life.
Oh, no.
That's started the conversation that he's a pussy, he's a fag, from a subset of people.
Yeah.
And having that said to my face as someone who was a closet attemptee hurt quite a lot and made me feel very, very unsafe, like in my own feelings and my own thoughts. And one day I just walked off site, walked into my superintendent's office, man, and yeah, full credit to him. He closed the door and gave me a cuddle as this staunch, this little stocky, staunch pom. Closed the door, gave me an awkward hug, and put me on the first bus and flight out of there. And that was the end of my FIFO journey. Again, my tail between my legs, very embarrassed. And not too long after, not like it needs more, but one of my best friends up there, probably the most outgoing guy I've met, he took his life too. And because I'd kept my experience to myself, there's so much guilt around not being vulnerable and not having the courage to speak up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I put all that, I blame myself for him taking his life back then, and so embarrassed that I didn't even go to his funeral, man.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I mean, like that's the dark, that's the lows, and people jump on these podcasts, and it's probably not expected to have like a level of emotion like that, but it's important, I guess, when I speak about this, it's important to understand the dark to appreciate the light. And this dualistic nature, this dualistic world that we live in, you can't have one without the other. You can't have the dark without the light, and the happiness without the suffering. And so, to understand that, we have to go to those levels. And luckily enough, people can experience that through listening rather than actually experiencing it.
Absolutely, yes.
And off the back of that, man, like in that last swing I was away before being evacuated, I was actually recording my first podcast. And I remember being so embarrassed about my voice because my mum told me I sounded like Kermit.
Oh, no.
Yeah, man. Like, I was so embarrassed about my voice and had so little confidence in myself as a human being that whenever someone would come back to the rooms next door to me, I'd hear their door shut and I'd just turn my microphone off and just sit there in silence and wait for them to leave and go back to the gym or go back to the driving range or get food. And then I'd turn it back on. And it took me about 5 weeks, man, to record that podcast, which ended up being 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But when I got evacuated, I launched that, started interviewing people, and that podcast snowballed and eventually went top 10 in Australia and New Zealand for mental health.
Yep.
Which just gave me a lot of opportunities to speak and to do men's circles and to coach, work with mining companies, and then, I partner with a company, Good Happiness Co. now, where we work with a lot of different mining companies, mixture of lived experience speaking. So what I'm just talking to you about, like, what is it like to be a FIFO worker to experience mental and emotional health issues? So we do that as well as mental and emotional health education, which is, in an industry that is masculine and male dominated. Yes. It's been a very interesting experience, man. Like, I've had so many times where I've gone to speak and then someone's just not been into it. Like a very good example is we went on tour around WA last year, and within the first minute, one of these guys, like this big beard, arms crossed, bandana on, sitting there, and he just called me a cunt straight up.
Oh,
And I'm like, what? I haven't even said anything yet. And so what I've learned through that is to not judge a book by its cover and just to keep rolling and allow it to flow. And after that, he gave me the finger wave, gave me a handshake and thanked me. And then while I was walking around site, I walked by his road train and he come over to me and just broke down and cried, gave me his story. And, this is a guy in his mid-60s who was an army veteran, had PTSD, road train driver. And so if we can break through to people who historically and generally are closed off and guarded, especially in this industry, like we're doing a good service and when we're making headway, man. And I feel like I am.
Look, you absolutely are. I was going to pause for a sec and just even allow the listeners just to take all that in. That's a very heavy load. But so grateful that you just open up about all those experiences and what you've been through so far, because that's a very heavy load to carry. In some of the circles, it's the view about it's not the size of the load, it's how you carry it. And you've for a long period of time you carried that yourself. But now clearly, through your podcast, through the connection with other men, you're able to share that load and release that load. And it's not putting it onto others, but by releasing it and acknowledging that where you're at and where you are. And actually there's a lightness that comes out of that. And that's what other men need to understand, that naming the shame, naming the guilt, talking to, I tried to commit suicide, actually talking into each of those and acknowledging that they are true and that they are real and you're not escaping from them is super powerful, super powerful. I think people underestimate how powerful that actually is. I watched a documentary last night, a guy by the name of Gabor Mate, and it was on the wisdom of trauma. Yep. And as soon as you're talking to what happened at the age of 15, for all those, you can find it on YouTube. So it's called The Wisdom of Trauma. Absolutely. This guy's groundbreaking now in how he's looking at the medical industry, how he's looking at treating people, addictions. He worked on the streets with homeless people for 12 years. It's such an eye-opening, amazing thing. Nick from the Amend Movement in Melbourne, I'm going to call you out. So thank you for dropping that into my inbox yesterday because, again, I love learning it and being educated in this space. So what Lachie talked to is about at the age of 15 when that girl basically shut him down and said, hey, I'm not here. That caused him to shut down his heart and never had the chance to express what that actually meant to him and how that made him feel. The suppression of that feeling is the trauma, not the event. And so carrying that trauma and never actually allowing that to release then goes, okay, because I'm holding on to it and the only way I can escape from this pain because I can't talk to it is, well, fuck it. I'm going to get on the grog. I'm going to get on the drugs. I'm going to shop my dick around to every girl that's willing to take it on board.
Shop my dick around. I've never heard that.
And that's what us guys do. And if I can't shop it around, I'm going to find pornography and I'm just going to tug it away to make sure that, I'm getting this escapism and I'm getting that dopamine hit and I'm getting that level of satisfaction. So feel free to use that moving forward if you like, right?
I will.
I give you permission. And that's as men, that's what we do. We shut off everyone else around us and we go into this world of isolation. And, and the other thing is, although you spoke to the fact that your parents openly expressed emotion, like my parents never did. So I was through, because they weren't allowed to. So ancestrally, they were always shut off from their emotions. So therefore, they didn't know how to allow me to express mine. So I just carried that as well. And I know I've handed that on to my kids. Now I'm doing everything I can to actually allow them to be expressive in their emotions, particularly about, the trauma I've caused them as a dad as they've grown up. And that's okay. Like, I'll own up and say, I was fucked up at points of time in as a parent. And they know that, and they'll go through their own journey. So I just really want to acknowledge, to go back to some of those things that you actually talked about. So let's talk about because I know there are many men, as you said, you've witnessed 2 of your friends actually commit suicide, which is hugely tragic in itself. But your thought process into why you felt that you were just so unworthy that you're better off not being here. Can we go back into that and just talk about
of course.
a bit more?
Yeah. So, I mean, context is king, I believe. And when we have context, we have an understanding of what compels us to show up a certain way. And then all of a sudden it's not us that is the behavior. We're not identifying with the behavior itself. It's like, okay, I have this unresolved trauma, like Dr. Gabor Mate would talk about, that is compelling me to act a certain way, because when this emotion comes up, I either run towards pain or pleasure as a form of avoidance or escape. And whether it's the grog, like you said, or whether it's taking your life, it's just a form of avoiding being in a particular emotional state, whether that's shame, guilt, or whatever. But for me personally, man, this it probably took about 2 years for me to work through this stuff in childhood. But what made me feel so unworthy was like this mixture, and to some level PTSD. At 6, my dad, being someone dealing with murder and rape as part of the homicide squad, didn't really have an outlet for his emotion besides exercise. Didn't drink, nothing like that, just this like swole jack dude. And sometimes he'd have outbursts. And this one time, I remember being in the bath with my little brother, and he come in and just like put my head under the water, and didn't stop. And so that's like, as someone who loved his dad, who, like, my dad is my hero, to have that happen gave me this like fear around him, and this feeling of being unsafe with the people that I love. And so what I didn't realize, and it's taken me a long time, so it took me a long time to work through this and get to this understanding, is what I didn't realize is that moment caused this level of I'm not enough for him. And then, and still to this day, like, I had this conversation with my dad, because they're over here from New Zealand in Perth for a holiday at the moment. I had this conversation with him that, of my whole life I've been seeking his approval. Everything I do is like with this question, or this inquisitive, like, Dad, am I good enough yet? Dad, is that good enough? And so it came from that moment. And because I didn't feel good enough for my dad, I didn't feel good enough for anyone else, and that moment with that high school girlfriend was just another form of validation. And then, if you're not good enough for your hero, you're not good enough for other people, you're definitely not going to be good enough for yourself. So it all spawned from that moment. And, to add to that, from 8 to 10, I was sexually abused. And from 8, had a porn addiction, because porn was used, and got told that my dick was too small throughout that whole 2 years. And the last time it happened, it was in this tin shower. I remember him saying, like, we've got to stop people going to think we're gay. So from about 10 years old, 8 years old, porn addiction. From 10 years old, like, insecurity around the size of my dick. And then close my eyes and see stuff happening and think, holy fuck, am I gay? So, I just, to prove that I wasn't gay, to prove that I was worthy, to prove that my dick was big enough, I was just going out and trying to get as much attention as I could, and not understanding that it all stemmed from this lack of self-worth. And that really just carried over when I ran away to Australia and see everything I did over here, until I had that moment where I got to choose to live for my daughter, and start looking at myself and my behavior.
Look, it was funny that you've just mentioned about penis size, dick size. I was actually talking to my wife, Jackie, last night exactly about this same thing. And the one thing that I realized was the first thing that we teach young boys is comparison. And the first thing we start with is the penis and the dick. The first thing when I grew up, it was like, open locker rooms for boys. I don't know what it's like now at schools, but, open dressing rooms, football clubs, open showers, everything was open. Now when you go, like everyone's always in undies and going in and out, because I feel that there's so much shame that people feel I cannot stand in an open men's locker room with my penis out, because my whole life and talking about porn, what's the first thing that we get taught about porn? I have to have a 12-inch dick or I'm not worthy to be able to have good sex with a female, right? Yep. So and there's so much of that around there that we attach so much to just this size of our penis. And then everything else just generates about, so if I got a small penis, I'm a small person and I'm a small player. This other person that's, wandering around, they must have a big dick. And then we get this whole racial element that kicks in there and go, oh, the black guys, they got all the big dicks, and all the white guys, they got the little dicks. I mean, Eddie Murphy talks about it in Delirious, right? I know there's a skit Eddie Murphy does in Delirious. It's actually really funny about how white men walk around like, all tight with a tight butt because they got these little small dicks, and how the big black man just wanders around and he's got the big thing flapping around, right? It's there. It's always talked to. And so we have this world of, we don't know any different because that's the comparison, and boys in locker rooms can be really, really cruel. Like, what the fuck are you using that thing for? Versus, and we nickname people horse, donkey, like, it's a really, it just dawned on me last night, going, fuck, like we're so conditioned from such a young age. And you can't have like parents seeing two boys go, oh, look at your dick, or young kids going to a boy and girl naked going, oh, you don't have what I've got. Quick, put your clothes on. Like, we shame bodies, we shame differences. There's no acceptance. Indigenous cultures, before Western world came in, run around all naked. Like, you even see them now, go for it. And they don't care because they understand it's not who they are. We're so fucked up in the Western society.
Yeah, and like a real good example of that comparison and how it leads to like thoughts and actions, behavior, and escapism is, man, I'd walk into a public restroom, and if there was too many people in the urinal and there wasn't a cubicle open, I'd get sweaty and clammy and nervous and freak the fuck out and walk back out of that restroom and just not go to the toilet. Like, yep. That's how embarrassed I was. And I even noticed it on the way back from our holiday 2 days ago. Stopped in at a BP, went to the restroom, guys at the urinal. I was like, okay, let's do it. And it's still this constant, like, having to work through that fear that's been embedded in me since 8 years old, 10 years old.
Yeah, stage fright. We joke about it. Like, and I put my hand up. If I go in a urinal and there's other people there, I actually mentally count down from 5 to 1 to try and trick my penis in releasing to let pee out. Like, how fuck's that? I'm 53, right?
I have to do that too, man. I have to breathe.
And you go, it's just a dick with urine coming out of it, right? And so, again, like, and I know I had an event. We went on a end-of-season trip, and we're all on a bus. And the bus wasn't stopping, and we're drinking heaps of grog. Like, I haven't drunk for 18 years, but this is when I was drinking a lot. And the only way to go to the toilet was via, like a siphon, right? Basically they had the hose out through the rubber parts in the door, and you had the larger bit at the top, that you'd pour oil on that into, right? And you're standing in the doorway, right? Could not go. For 3 hours, in the end, I was in so much pain. I told the bus driver, if he doesn't fucking pull over, I'm slamming the brakes on myself. Like, and then I had to run 50 yards away from everyone else. Like, that is so screwed up, right? And I was the running joke. Even now, there is a running joke around those group of guys that I played sport with about the fact that, I couldn't actually even do a simple pee into a siphon. And talk about holding on to trauma. But it's so common, and I don't think and I still feel it's because of that. We are just conditioned that way. about how we see ourselves. And, now, age of 53, I actually recently been putting music on, as Jackie does it, put music on over the nighttime shower, and I'm actually dancing naked in front of the mirror. And I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. Like, I'm actually enjoying that, and just trying to find these different techniques now to accept my body, who I am, the size of every part of me, and work our way through that. But I think we just don't talk about it.
Nah. And I mean, going into Bridge and Extreme, I remember being like catatonic and just being a shell of myself for like 3 weeks leading into that, because someone said, oh, you already signed up for that. You might have to get naked. And I was like, oh shit, what the fuck have I done? And so I was like, I'm committed. I'm going, like, this needs to happen. But I was just like so distraught.
Yeah.
Didn't really eat, didn't really want to drink, didn't want to do anything. Just stayed on the couch for like 3 weeks. And then I remember flying over to Brisbane, and the first weekend, expecting it the whole weekend, and it not happening. And then at the end of that weekend, we got asked how people viewed us. And mine was like scared little boy, most of them. And I was like, fuck, is that really how I've shown up? And, after sitting on that for the week, it was like, oh, it's because I was so afraid of having to get naked. And I was in such a state of like fear and anxiety and overwhelm that I just couldn't be myself. I couldn't interact as like the usual version of me. And so that next weekend, I remember the night before posting on Instagram, being like, oh, I'm going to get naked tomorrow. I'm going to ask to get naked. I need to like get past this fear. And I had a bunch of guys from Men's Medicine, the men reach out and be like, fuck yeah, do it, bro. And so that next morning I put my hand up. Actually, after Preston said, oh, we had this guy just get naked. And I was like, fuck, shit. like this is my biggest fear. Like, can I get naked? And like, yeah, come on.
Wow.
And they got me to stand on a chair, and, me trying to be me, trying to avoid as I used to do back then, which is through humor and through performing, like trying to make it a performance. They're like, no, it's not a performance. Just stand still, look people in the eyes. We'll tell you when to take stuff off. And so I had to look people in the eyes of standing on this fucking chair, take my shirt off first, and then look everyone. And I was like, oh my God, shaking on this chair. Yeah. And then they told me to dack myself, and did that. And I had to stand there for like five minutes and eyeball everyone.
Wow.
Well, they just looked at me, bro. And probably the most terrifying, but also the most freeing moment of my life, like doing that.
Yeah.
I remember being on this high after that, being like, I'm healed. I'm fucking healed. There's nothing I have to work through in my life ever again. And then the next night I got fucking put straight back down. But, that's such a cool moment to do that. And then after seeing everyone else naked at some point, I was like, oh shit, I don't have to be so afraid of this.
Yeah. It's I did Unleash the Beast, which is the weekend after Extreme, and I went and bought 2 pair of shorts that I could wear underwear underneath. Only in the event that we may have ended up getting naked. It's like, it's a fucking all boys thing. Sorry, take us back. This is why it's so critical what Lachie just said. That was a men and women. Like, so Extreme and Bridge was actually, I think it was about 70 odd men and women in that's Extreme. So that Lachie had to do that.
Plus all those coaches, man.
Yeah, correct. Exactly. There's probably 10 or 15 coaches on top of that. So yeah, huge. On Unleash, I'm like, fuck it, it's all men. Like, when not going to happen? Bang, walk in the door, straight up. Now, I'm not meant to say that, but fucking bang, like you're there. And it's like, fuck now.
Really?
Yeah. First thing. It's, again, and it was interesting, that experience. But the whole thing about it was, fuck off, you're a man and you got a penis. Can we all move on now? You know, it's like, actually, yeah, cool, good. Yeah, and it's I know what you mean, but yeah, the healing and the getting over it is so powerful. That we need to do that. Shit, we've unpacked a lot of stuff.
You had enough about talking about dicks.
Yeah, probably. No, that's really funny. Now, look, so let's move on to where you are now. Like, I want to allow you the chance to talk to some of the amazing things that you're actually now doing, because, as I said, you're working very close with your best friend, and a guy you saw as a brother, Matt Bruce, on the Men's Collective. You made a decision to go, hey, I'm now going to focus on FIFO. I'm going to focus in on the men, and I'm going to really focus in that space. So, talking exactly where you're at with that now to us, if you don't mind, and what that means to you, and what you're now doing to try and help these men to understand that they can actually just be human and can have emotions, and it's okay.
Yeah, I guess all of this started last year, man. I put together this vulnerability course. Just went and knocked it out for free and put it on Kajabi, and since then have had close to 300 men from Australia and New Zealand go through that. It's a 17-day course, and it's like understanding how to communicate. It's understanding your why. It's understanding your values, your needs, and boundaries, and all that sort of stuff. And then finding someone that you trust, not for validation, but someone that you actually trust to open up to. And so, off the back of that, I guess Men's Work Collective came about, and the intention was to help men who had a message on their hearts, who wanted to coach, to put them in a position to actually deliver something online, which is something that both Maddie and I had done quite successfully before. And that's where that came from, man. And it sort of just snowballed from there, and we ended up getting some really cool coaches from Aussie and NZ, and having like quite a bit of success with that. But within that, like the coaching and holding people through that space, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy. And what felt real for me is that I was trying too hard to be in the consciousness space. I was avoiding the part of me that was seen and heard in corporate, because being in that consciousness space, being in men's work, it's like this belief around corporate being dirty. And so I was really just avoiding the fact that I was good at being in that space, and I had a higher purpose in that space by being in Men's Work Collective. And so that, as well as through one of our coaching containers, we just didn't deliver to the extent that we could have. Have the structure in place, and so just had to take that on the chin and realize, like, holy shit, like, we went in with this intention, we didn't quite deliver. How do we make sure this is a win-win? And then from there, I just made the decision to divert my attention for the first time in my life to one area. Because for me, having all these different streams, all these different avenues for my energy, my attention, kept me safe. It was just a form of non-commitment. And so I decided to commit, and it was very hard to have that conversation with Maddie, and someone that I love dearly, who has been my biggest teacher, to step away from that and something I enjoy doing, and to step fully into FIFO or mining, and to help mostly men. There aren't too many women that we engage with, but help that industry, which I'm from, which I've had friends lost to. It's big on my heart, man, and I feel like I'm in a good space. And since making that decision to step away from Men's Work Collective, I've had contracts come in. I've had opportunities to go out and do deep men's work, deep healing with men on site, which I told myself this story that I couldn't do that in that environment, that I had to do it with Men's Work Collective. And so stepping away from that allowed me to step into it and test the waters, and it's been well received. I've had men shake and cry in my arms, and ground them in a place where they come out of an emotion that's like deep grief or sadness or hurt or betrayal, and they come to a place where they just feel relieved that they had the opportunity to feel the sensation, understand the emotion, and to allow the emotion to be there without resistance. So that's where I'm at now, man. We're working with a lot of different mining companies, and got a lot of people in our corner, and I'm quite content with what I'm doing, and very proud of what I've been able to achieve so far.
Yeah, and the one thing that I definitely can pick up on, but just with this conversation, but also just seeing, what you've been putting out on, Facebook and Instagram, is that it feels like it's a sort of funny term, but it feels like you found your happy place. It feels like you've landed where you were meant to have landed. Like you had to get on the journey, but now you're in that space to go, I know this is where I'm meant to be. I know this is my calling. I had to take a journey to land here, but now you're just doing what's purely in your heart and natural for you, and what your intuition says is the right thing, and everything else shines off the back of that. Because as you're right, there is no resistance, there is nothing else. It's like, yeah, this just is right. It feels right. This is what I'm called to do, and I'm actually now executing it. And as you said, the opportunities are coming in because of that, because you've surrendered out to this beautiful universe. Say, I'm going to surrender out to you, and this is what I'm going to do. And they go, cool, we've been waiting for you. Here you go. Here's your opportunities. Jump on board. And that's exactly what seems to be happening for you. And I think that's beautiful, and that's amazing.
Yeah, been a few stories to work through to get to that point, and it's just funny to see how the mind concocts these stories to convince us of a limiting belief that we have, and mine particularly not being worthy, and then not being worthy of being in corporate, being obviously being on site, being one of the workers on the ground, and having this mindset or this perception of us against them, people in the offices versus us on the ground. And anytime someone would come to site, it's like, what the fuck does this peanut want? And and so I've had to like really peel back all of that stuff and not view myself as that person, and learn to accept that this is my gift, and this is my gift to the industry. And working through comparison too, like going away with guys that are really good facilitators and comparing myself to them. And then, putting myself in this place where I believed I couldn't be a facilitator. And then as soon as I got the chance after stepping away from Men's Work Collective, like literally 2 days after making that decision, it was like, oh, you go away and do the stuff yourself. And so I went away and did it myself. I was like, fuck, I'm really good at this. Like, I always knew I was really good at it because I do it anyway, but for some reason in this environment, I haven't let myself. And so, just from there, that the confidence has built, and like my trust in myself has built. And I just, like I said before, I just feel really content and proud of myself and what's happening.
Yeah. Oh, look, and hats off to you, man. I think that's an absolute beautiful space to have landed in. So you've been very generous with your time this morning for us to have this conversation, and I really genuinely appreciate it and very grateful. A message that you would like to leave to the men out there who are listening in on this podcast about, what they can do, or, something that you've learned that's a piece of wisdom that you can share with the other men and women that listen in as well, and so they can tell them men.
I think if we're going along the lines of like Dr. Gabor Mate speaking about trauma, it's not the moment itself, it's your perception of it. Or I guess the way I'd frame it, it's the decision you make around whether you avoid or integrate it. So I guess to build out that capacity, we really have to learn how to connect to the body and to experience emotion. And at times it's going to be uncomfortable, but if we're someone who's numbed ourselves, if we're someone who's used coping mechanisms, then likely being in joy and pleasure and gratitude is going to be uncomfortable. So you might as well get uncomfortable with an intention, right? And so the best way I've found to do that, to connect into the body and to allow yourself to experience what it's like to have emotion, because emotion can only be experienced in the body, it can't be experienced in the mind. So we have to be there. And the best tool that I've found, which Maddie taught me and I've added stuff too, is to breathe and to take 6 deep breaths into the belly, go parasympathetic, switch from fight or flight to rest and digest, and tune in. Like what sensations are alive? Is it constriction in the chest? Is it tension in the shoulders and the neck, or the sides of the head? Is it tension in the jaw? Can you wiggle the shoulders and the jaw? drop them and allow them to relax and tune in and see what other sensations are there. What's in the belly, what's in the legs, what's in the arms, what's in the hands. And then, once you've got that, it's like with all of those sensations, with all of that you've brought conscious attention to, what emotion would you label that with? And, if I was to drop in right now, chest feels expansive. There's a little bit of tension in the neck, down the back of the shoulder blades, and the legs feel tingly. And if I was to label that with an emotion, it'd be apprehensive about my parents leaving soon. So, and I mean, like from there, just when that emotion comes, when you experience that in the body, when you've identified it, it's just, can you welcome that in like an old friend? Can you allow that to be there? Can you allow your body to adjust to what it's like to feel that emotion? Because likely if you're going back to that emotion, it's something that's attached to the memory of the past, and that memory is so visceral because it's attached to that emotion. Just like if you have a really good memory from a birthday or whatever, or Christmas, it's attached to that emotion. That's why it's so visceral. And so when we go back, or when we allow ourselves to feel these feelings, what we're really doing is getting better at feeling the emotion attached to that memory, and that memory and that emotion, and in combination, compel us to behave and act a certain way. And that behavior is either escape and avoid, or integrate. And so if we get better at feeling, then we get better at making decisions from a place that's grounded, from a place that isn't built on top of fear and scarcity or avoidance. So that's what it would be. Like, connect to your body, give yourself permission to feel, and work through it from there. It becomes very freeing and very liberating as someone who has run their entire lives, whether through alcohol or drugs, whether through shutting down and isolating, whether like that's attacking someone or outburst. It becomes very freeing when you can identify yourself, what sensations are alive when someone triggers you, how that feels, what emotion that is, and when you can allow that to just be there, because when you allow it to be there, it dissipates. I'm a big believer in what we resist persists, or what we dams us back, and resistance just causes perpetual suffering. So it's not necessary. And connecting to the body and experiencing emotion in its fullness is, I guess, the release valve for that.
Beautiful. Very, some amazing words of wisdom. And I just think that simple exercise that you actively demonstrated there, and that the pause you had, you allowed yourself the time. You didn't rush it. You just allowed yourself the time to truly tap into, that emotion that you were feeling, and then being able to talk to it. So, yeah, look, would recommend all men, even if listen to everything, and then what you do is you grab that tool and say, cool, here's a tool I can now use moving forward to start on my little journey. So, yeah, I really appreciate that, man. Thank you for dropping that nugget in at the end. That's so cool. It's something I actually hadn't thought through. So, hello, something else for me to add into my toolbox as I go forward. Appreciate that. I really want to thank you again for jumping on. I know that there's a lot going on with you at the moment with this new venture. You still got the podcast happening, so I really appreciate the fact that you've taken this time out of your day. I hope you have a beautiful rest of the weekend, and we'll definitely make sure we stay in touch, and we'll keep chatting. So thanks, man, and much love.
Thank you, brother.
All right, take care. So that was the amazing Lachie Samuel. It's going to take me a little bit to process, to go through that. I ask guests to come on, and I ask if they're willing to open up about their story, and Lachie just went absolutely to every depth of that story. So I'm extremely grateful. I'll walk out of this just in a lot of reflection about, his life and his story and my life and my story. And that's what it's all about. So again, Lachie, thank you and good luck with your adventures moving forward. So that is a wrap for episode 30 of the Unearthed Man podcast. As I said earlier, you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook. I'm sending you much love and peace. Take care. And that's it for now. Bye.